Undoing racism. She does a lot with it. She's been training with them for years up in New York, and so she does amazing stuff. And I'm always talking to Ma'at Lewis, Dr. Ma'at Lewis. She's a psychologist. She's come down to Atlanta. We used to do for 3 years. We did quite a bit of training. She was coming down at least quarterly, doing some training. So yeah. So we got somebody here. Okay.
No, that was me. I'm sorry. I think.
Oh, that's you. Okay, and that's okay. Now that's good. So, okay, so you looking and I told you to share it, and then I didn't share.
I'm trying to figure out how to share it. Yeah.
That is hilarious. I'm like, oh, you can share it on your page, and I didn't. Okay, that's good. Okay, so you looking and
I'm gonna share it real quick. I'm trying to figure out how to share it.
That is hilarious. I'm like, oh, you can share it on your page, and I didn't.
Yeah, I don't want the audio to get crazy, so.
Yeah, so I just always mute the other one. Okay, so we have this game. Hold on a second. I have this game that I play, so I call it Black Love.
Oh,
and yeah. I figured you would appreciate that. And it's really easy. So all you have to do is I'm going to give you a category. And in that category, you have to name 5 things in that category within 10 seconds.
All right. I'm game. Let's go.
Okay. Oh, look at you. I think you're the first person that was just like, I'm game. Most people are like, whoa.
I'm open for it.
All right. So I want you to blame Alethea, my office manager, for your category because I just said, hey, Sister Dawn, there's my Sister Dawn down in Guyana in South America. Alethea gave me this category for you. Okay, so here's the catch. You just have to say the words. You can't say, like you just heard me say so and no fillers.
Okay.
Just say your answers, okay?
All right.
So your particular category is you have to give me 5 names of Jesus. 5 names of Jesus. Go.
Prince of Peace, Lily of the Valley, Rose of Sharon, Bright Morning Star, Friend.
I don't like you because that was too easy.
I mean, that's a good hymn and gospel song in the Black church. Yeah, it's my bright morning star, the Lily of the Valley, the Rose of Sharon. Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
When I had to say this, okay, so Alethea, that was terrible. That was a terrible category. I just need you to know.
You let Alethea know I had wrote her name down because I was gonna come see her, but now I'm good.
Okay, I gotta give you another category because you did that one too easy.
Okay.
5. No, that's easy. She said 5 disciples of Jesus. I can name 5 disciples of Jesus. I ain't a Christian. No, that one don't count.
Yeah, that one would be easy.
Okay. 5 revolutionaries from the Bible.
Oh, 5 revolutionaries from the Bible. Moses.
You just said see?
Well, that one took me to another place mentally. I was trying to also get some sisters in there. You say Deborah and Mary, and so Deborah, Mary, Ruth, Esther, Vashti.
Boom! Look at you! Look at you! See, I can't keep up with you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Ifetayo Ojolade. I am here with my guest who is knocking it out the box already, and we ain't even started the conversation. This is my brother, Reverend Brady Radford. He is a licensed professional counselor. He is also a pastor. He is also just someone that is committed to doing this work around healing Black couples specifically, and then healing our community. Thank you, Reverend, for showing up and hanging out with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here and to join in having such a powerful discussion.
Yeah. So our topic today, we're supposed to be talking about, and I called you or I texted you and I was like, I want to have this conversation about Jesus. Okay. So I already said I'm not a Christian, but that doesn't mean that I can't appreciate the life of Jesus. So I always see him as this like revolutionary that's pushing against this oppressive system. That's the way that I, in my mind, conceptualize Jesus. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn about from his life and the way that he moved through the world in his teachings. And so I was like, okay, so let's use that as a framework to talk about resistance and being able to heal from trauma when you're in oppressive circumstances. So I wanted to kind of get your ideas or thoughts, because right now we're in the midst of having this conversation. And if we go and look at the land of Jesus and where he hung out, there's a huge conflict that is brewing. Well, it's been going on for many years now, since the 1940s, and it's exploding now. And I'm wondering if you had any reflections, and it doesn't have to be like super, academic or spacey, but just your personal reflections of what's going on right now.
Well, when I think about Jesus, I think about him being someone who decidedly chose to align himself with the people who were not part of the identified power structure. When I think about the conflict that we're seeing in the land now, I think about what it means for some of our Palestinian sisters and brothers to experience somebody walking into your home and just saying, this is now my home. I mean, I saw a clip the other day where a sister said, hey, we know you, like, this is our house. And he says, yeah, but if I don't take it, somebody else is going to come and take it. I mean, it's unconscionable when I think about it, just from the perspective of how degrading and how psychologically traumatizing, emotionally traumatizing it would be to have the same experience here in America. And it ain't far off from part of our history, but I was trying to figure out how to talk to my kids about this and just what it would be like for me if somebody walked through my door and said, no, this right here is mine now. But we would have trouble. And so it's hard to imagine that we see this on the world's landscape and there's not a more pronounced response to the level of sort of inhumanity and the level of occupation that we see. I don't profess to be a scholar at all in regards to the politics of the land, but I just know from the perspective of honoring humanity, this is troubling, what I'm looking at.
Yeah. And so when I think about this and I think about Jesus in his lifetime, so he's basically existing in occupied territory, because you got Rome, the Roman Empire, that is occupying the territory. And I see parallels there. I mean, I'm sure like people like, not so much talking about kind of the political history of it, but you have this force that's coming in and taking over and telling you basically who you can worship and where you can live and how you can live, and people resisting against that. And when I think about that in terms of people of African descent, like you said, that's not something that's far away from our history. So we're not talking about long time ago,
right? So, I mean, we're not talking about a far reach back in history. We're talking about something that still lives in sort of our DNA and still exists in some of our family systems, depending on how far, between we are with greats and great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers who are still sort of living on the earthly realm. I mean, the history, the psychology behind living with some of the dehumanizing behavior, it's not far off. And it shows up in different ways, even still today. I guess one of the things I've been interested in lately is just sort of trying to figure out what's a way for us to respond to sort of the continued traumatization. Even when, you open your social media account and here you have more and more videos of Black bodies, women and men continuing to be victimized. The protocol for just sort of maintaining personal safety and hoping that it goes away, I mean, that doesn't seem sufficient, because it feels like the animus, the anger, the tyranny of whiteness only seems to grow and get stronger and stronger. We're talking about our context.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that in terms of, and I try to not watch the stuff, but even just this recent video of when you see kind of Republicans that have gotten more emboldened under this last administration, and I'm choosing my words carefully, under the former administration, and these behaviors that you see where more and more aggression, just overt aggression towards people for minor things, or when we have differing political opinions or different ideas of just about how to exist in the world, and it's met with hostility. And I think it's really interesting because constantly in these kind of traumatic experiences, it's almost like whiteness gives you, not almost like, it's as if whiteness gives you permission to be violent and aggressive. And only response that's acceptable for people of color is to be silent or nice.
Yeah. Or to hunker down, survive the attack, and then when an olive branch is extended, by even allowing you to show up, be ready and willing to offer forgiveness.
Yes.
That brings to mind, there was a brother who was marching out of a rally in the past, and the guy punched him in the face. Well, that became a news cycle where you got this brother who's hugging and forgiving the man who punched him in the face, and the man who punched him in the face is saying, oh, I just don't know what got into me. You know, on the grand scheme of things, America has never had a forthright reckoning with white rage. And so that's why the tyranny of whiteness continues to operate in the way that it does. You know, Carol Anderson, historian over at Emory, has a book entitled White Rage that does a masterful job of helping us understand that white rage is the response to Black progress. And because rage exists in a realm of sort of anti-Blackness, when progress is made, rage comes forth. And America would rather, let's pretend that it didn't happen. I mean, we're in the midst of a news cycle right now where certain elected leaders from the state of Georgia are suggesting January 6th was just a run-of-the-mill tour of the Capitol. Maybe rowdy people, but by and large, just a run of the Capitol, a regular tour of the Capitol. You know, when thinking about trauma, one of the first things that comes to mind is that managing the sense of trauma that we face in the midst of political resistance begins with our having some agency, with naming naming our reality, naming what we're facing, naming and narrating the traumas that we have experienced, the abuse that's part of this cycle and system. And I think that's one of the things that Jesus did masterfully, is that he had a way that sort of evidenced a commitment not to just live in the society as someone who was hoping to get by, hoping to fly underneath the radar, hoping to express his Africanness, but not too much that it upsets the status quo or even engages it. And I'm saying it that way because I think, by and large, when you consider different ways of sort of being in the world right now, there's some of us who figure, let me figure out how to live in this system, to fly under the radar, don't become detectable, don't engage anything that becomes troubling, because that's sort of how I will preserve my own sense of peace. But there's no way to completely absolve yourself from, again, I'm going to say, the tyranny of whiteness. I mean, we talked about, it used to be sort of respectability politics. If you act the right, say the right thing, or look the right way, then nothing bad will ever happen to you. That's assuming a level of humanity in the system that's doubled down on inhumanity. And if you just act the right way, it won't come up. I just don't find that to be the truth of the reality. And I think that part of us responding begins with our having some voice and some agency in calling the thing that it is, like naming the reality and not living in what we're now seeing pushed as sort of a big lie, that if people in power say a certain thing long enough, the assumption is that people will either be quiet or just assume it to be true. And I don't see that having worked out for Black folk over the course of the history here in America.
And I think it's important to define this word agency, because people use it, and I see us use it, and we can kind of get with big words, and like, let's just break that down. When you say having the agency to name things, what does agency mean?
When I think about agency, I think about the ability to have some personal effectiveness and some personal ability to move and manipulate the situations and the systems around me, to decide how I participate in a system, and to be intentional about not participating in a way that ensures my own sort of dismissal or my own
Destruction.
destruction.
Mm-hmm.
I think considering our agency is what I think Jesus considered his agency when he realized, when we see him throughout the text make decisions, again, not to align with the professed power structures of the day, not to make a decision to go along to get along, but to evidence a commitment that really stands in the prophetic tradition that Christians receive from the Old Testament, that Jesus is operating in a way that assumes a responsibility for calling out systems that don't speak truth or live in truth. And the what would otherwise be the case is you have to commit to living a lie. That you have to consciously or unconsciously commit to sort of living in a lie in such a way that might give you the opportunity to profit in this world, but might very well also cost you your own soul.
Yes, I love that. The thing that I wrote down when you were saying that, when you're talking about agency, is gaslighting. And so what has become the norm in this country is gaslighting. It's telling people what they see is not true, telling people the sky is not blue, that it's purple, telling people that there is opportunity, that there is no racism. There's these constant lies that are told. And if you don't believe the lie, then the gaslighting part is you're crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We told you that the sky is purple. Because you don't see the sky as purple, then you're crazy. Then there's a mental health problem with you. We're normal. And we see this over and over again. It's like the majority of people in this, well, I won't say the majority of people. Let me take that back. So when you hear lies said over and over again on a television, in social media, when it's repeated over and over again, you begin to think the majority of people believe the lie. And even if it is the majority of people believe the lie, it doesn't make the lie the truth.
Right. Very much so. It does, I mean, it's got it. I think we have to talk about power and influence, and sort of how the presumption that, people who have more power maybe know what's right, and that speaks to the way that sometimes we discredit our own voice, because we assume that the loudest voice is the most correct voice, and that's not always the case. I mean, January 6th was my birthday, so I was thinking about, I'm sitting on the couch.
Oh, what?
I'm watching this unfold. I mean, that was also the day that it was confirmed that Warnock and Ossoff took Georgia. Yeah. So I was like, okay, celebration. And then it immediately turns to, the insurrection. And it's just like, I wonder how they will come out of this. I wonder what will be the spin that's placed upon this. But the assumption that there won't be a spin was never an idea in my mind. It was, this is going to be really interesting to see what becomes the spin in the midst of such brazen whiteness on display. And it would be funny if it were not so sad. That we are in this place where the glaring inconsistencies in the application of what purports to be law and order gets executed in this American society. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so sad.
So what's the difference between September 6th, January 6th, what happened on January 6th, because those folks are saying that they were trying to resist. Like, you saw folks, if you saw it in the videos, they're saying, this is a revolution. We're resisting this tyranny. what's the difference between what was happening on January 6th and what Jesus was doing in terms of resisting the Roman Empire?
That's a great question. I think what has to be clear about what Jesus was doing is where what we see as the source of Jesus's power. And I say that from the perspective of Jesus in the text never purports to seek a worldly power. He's never operating in an empire's consciousness.
Got it.
He's operating in the sense of a spirit. I'm going to say a spiritual consciousness that is beyond this world, and a type of power that is not limited to the confines of this world. And so he's not attempting to overthrow the government that he might replace it with what we're seeing and what we understand here in the physical. But he is, in Matthew's gospel, there's a language of, he is talking about a kingdom of God, a world that can exist. And I would suggest a world that can exist both in spirit and in flesh, but it begins with a spiritual reality that finds ways to manifest in the physical reality, where truth, where justice, where compassion becomes the norm. And having that as his call makes it difficult now, because you also have to contend with the fact that when you talk about truth, you're saying Jesus comes to reveal that truth, reveal that, oh no, the way they use power here in this world, that ain't the only way to use power. Now we say, well, Jesus, I mean, man, the way they use power seems to be pretty effective. If we can get our hands on some of that, we can, overthrow them and put our stuff in place, and we'll be good. Which is what I think we were witnessing on January 6th, is that this whole system has a belief in a certain kind of power. We were watching mostly white men, white women. And I want you to think about something. Most of them also had white kids that were in hotels all around the city of DC.
I didn't even think about that.
So when you talk about generational tyranny and hate, I mean, you're talking about not just people who came by themselves, we're talking about a whole community that's marshaled in that way to sort of operate, under the assumption that this is our system, it belongs to us, and that we're going to take our house back.
Yeah.
And so one of the things Jesus was never suggesting that this was just confined to the earthly realm is his house. He was suggesting that, think about the Lord's Prayer, which is a very well-known prayer in the Christian church, that we might build a kingdom on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
But it begins in the heavens. It begins with this, with the idea and the intention of God's design. And I would say as best we are able to spiritually discern it and understand it.
Okay, but wait a minute. Hold on, Rev. Because a lot of those folks were there in the name of Jesus.
No.
That's what they said. I ain't say it. That's what they said.
This is right. This I preached about in the following Sunday, because we have to contend with how we again begin to align the powers of this world with what we know or assume to be the power of God. And so even when we talk about God, if we only see God in terms of power, might, triumphalism, victory, then when power, might, triumphalism, and victory is expressed in this world, there'll be some people who assume, because they win and that must be of God. And so, yes, there were people out there who had Jesus flags, Jesus 2020. And I think we have to contend with, one of the most segregated hours in America is 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. And that there is an American evangelical Christian consciousness that suggests that God will be on our side as long as we're attempting to do those things that align with how we know God to be. Victorious, always powerful, always triumphant. And so, what's on the other side of that? In Isaiah, there's a place where God is talking to the people. And he says, when you go through the waters, I'll be with you. When the waters raise up, I'll ensure that they won't overwhelm you. And I thought about that's God suggesting that in the deepest moments of trouble, travail, or despair in life, I'm going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And that positions God in a completely different way than just how this American consciousness identifies God. Primarily Western American consciousness identifies God as always being triumphant, always being victorious. So in that case, that God would never allow you to go through water. That God would never allow the waters to raise up, because in the end, God has always got to be the victor. And I think we have mixed messaging about that in the church. But I think it also serves the power structure when you're talking about that and the white Western American consciousness.
I want to pull up. There's something. It's going to come up in a second. A quote that I read from Frederick Douglass. He was very, very much criticized at the time because people said that he was anti-Christian.
I thought,
Go ahead.
You I say the Zora Neale Hurston quote, where she talks about people's. How does she say that people's God reflects, their idea? I'm going to find it. It's about people's we create a God in our heads that reflects our own values or ideas.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to find it. It's on here. Oh, I got friends for now. Here it is. Okay, Frederick Douglass. Let me see. He said, "What I have said against religion, I mean strictly to apply to slave-holding religion of this land. Between the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ, I recognize the widest possible difference. So wide that to receive the one as good, pure, and holy is of necessity to reject the other as bad, corrupt, and wicked. To be the friend of one is of necessity to be the enemy of the other. I love the pure, peaceful, and impartial Christianity of Christ. I therefore hate the corrupt, slave-holding, women-whipping, cradle plundering, partial, and hypocritical Christianity of this land."
Ashe. I mean, you gotta. So you have to be able to call a thing the thing that it is. Mm-hmm. And one of the challenges in the Christian church today is that we have replaced a prophetic witness with a sense of just moral goodness. That if we just all be nice in the name of Jesus, then that will sort of solve the problems of the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, that ain't what I even see from Jesus when he in the gospel marches into the temple and tell these people, "You ain't turning my Father's house into a marketplace," and he turns over tables and breaks out the whip. I mean, part of what he's challenging there is the alignment between the powers of this empire, the powers of Rome, and their alignment with the religious system and the church. And so that belief that to be a good Christian means submitting to particular kinds of leadership that are uncritical of the status quo. I mean, I agree with Douglas. Mm-hmm. There's another quote who says, I'll take Christ, but you can keep your Christianity because it's become so convoluted. It's become a puppet of the powers rather than a prophet against the powers. We got to contend with that. We got to contend with that in the church when we are talking about money as the ultimate sign of blessings. We got to contend that in the church when we talk about certain levels of possessions being the idea of what it means to be most connected.
Wow. Okay, so Rev, you gotta I want to bring this forward. And go ahead.
I just want to read that quote from
yes, please.
From Zora Neale Hurston. She says, "Gods always behave like the people who created them." Okay. I mean, gods always behave like the people who created them. Mm-hmm. That's another conversation we got to have in the church. That our understanding to God is in many ways is constructed by what we conceive. And I mean, I think God is bigger than anything we can conceive, but we also have to, again, go back to examine. We have to interrogate our own assumptions about what it means that that we have by and large operated in a system that also supports a certain manner of violence as part of our religious and theological underpinnings. That, I mean, we talk about the death of Jesus Christ being the salvific moment, and we sort of separate from that the life of Jesus Christ, where he did most of the modeling about what it means to live with sort of a kingdom consciousness. We talk about him dying without ever being clear. He didn't just die, he was killed.
Murdered.
Yeah, he was murdered by state-sanctioned violence to ensure the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome that is only secured with bullet and boot.
Yes.
I mean, so in the life of Jesus, we have to consider that there's something that we see about his level of commitment to the call that he felt placed upon his life, that even the threat of death didn't deter him, but we can't just be in a place where we assume that it's only his death that becomes redemptive. You know, Nancy Pelosi got caught up in her comments after George Floyd trial, you know, in that same kind of way.
And I think about that. So if we think about his death, you can think about, you know, some of his last words where he's, "Forgive them, Father, for that they know not what they do." And kind of this focus on forgiveness for what you said, state-sanctioned violence. Because that's what that was. And I'm wondering your thoughts about that, because that's kind of like one of the first responses that this expectation that Black people should forgive state-sanctioned violence over and over and over again. And I mean, I do admittedly, it is changing. I don't see that isn't like one of the first responses, because in the last year I noticed that it is changing. But just from the perspective of you, coming from the perspective of a reverend, how do you address that or talk to people about the idea of forgiveness when consistent state-sanctioned violence is occurring?
So I serve Trinity Presbyterian Church, and on prayer calls and in sermons we talk about, forgiveness is the goal. Let's be honest, it may not be my starting point. Forgiveness is the goal, but the other thing that Christ really does a great job of is meeting people where they are. And fake forgiveness is no forgiveness at all. I want kind of forgiveness that comes by way of the struggle, that struggles with the fact that, oh no, where we end in this relationship is not where we began. And that my initial intentions for maybe serving you back everything that you have served me, that might be my starting place. But one of my commitments to living out my faith is that I won't allow that to be my only location. Now, how does that work in terms of us talking about mental health? We have to be clear in the church that faking it till you make it is not a sustainable solution. That just because, I've had someone say to me, I'm a Christian, so I got to forgive you. But don't fake that. I mean, if you're offended by something, if we have to find ways to honor the pain and the trauma of living in this system that is primarily based on anti-Blackness, and that promise and living that out cannot begin with just skipping to a presumed solution of forgiveness. And we need to be able to deal with our feelings, hurt, anger, pain, grief, so that we can process through them, and then maybe imagine what's next, but not forsake it in such a way that it eats us from the inside out, while we're putting on a mask that assumes we're not affected by it.
Is there anything in the Bible that also talks about truth, reconciliation, any kind of reparative justice before
Yeah.
you get to the idea of forgiveness?
So I am, when you talk about reconciliation, I think about a place where Paul talks about us having a ministry of reconciliation. I think about a place in Matthew's gospel where it talks about what to do if you are offended by a brother or sister. You know, but again, by and large, we have to be clear that knowing where we end up is not synonymous with sort of traveling the journey to get there. And my true concern in regards to what we see in the church is that most of us skip over the process in order to get to the destination.
Mm-hmm.
In doing so, we forsake ourselves and forsake the true nature of healing, because healing takes time.
Yeah.
And so, even as Jesus was saying, "Father, forgive them for they know not what they do." Yeah, I want to be able to say that one day. But I got some stuff I got to work through, because what I'm looking at, in transparency, I mean, it angers me, it frustrates me, it saddens me, it grieves me, especially as I think about the world my children will receive.
Okay. Other thing I wrote down. Now I had all these other questions I was going to ask you. I ain't even got to none of them questions. I went a totally different direction. So I just wrote down demons, because what I keep continuously perceived right now is just demonic energy. And my spiritual tradition, there's no concept of the devil. There is concepts of basically demonic energy, or energy that's trying to be harmful. It seems as though that energy is pervasive, if you will. How do you, and causing lots of harm and lots of traumatic experiences, how do you encourage people to continue to have faith that things will get better, but then also have confidence that they can overcome the evil that we're experiencing in the world right now?
That's a loaded question.
I knew it was.
That's a 17-part question. I don't know. I mean, the Christian theology does have an understanding of the devil, Hasatan. I can tell you that I have a expansive working theology around that.
Okay.
I will tell you that I think the evils that we are seeing, I think I don't know about attributing it all to the devil. I think the evil is within us in some ways. It's within this society, this culture, and I think it's been given clearance to run rampant. I'm saying within us, but I mean that primarily in regards to this society. I think one notion in the Christian church in terms of free will sort of dictates that the way the American consciousness has sort of received that is, I can do whatever I want to do without an obligation to any sense of communal well-being. And I think that conflicts with my sense of appreciation, investment in community. Yeah, I think the evil is, I don't know. I'm going to first just say, I don't know. I'll start by saying, I don't know. When I see some of these manifestations of racist behavior in a society that's based on racism, I think this is the supreme evil. I think about a place in Jeremiah's text when it says, these people create new ways of doing evil. But I think it's ingrained into our fabric, and it affects all of us. I think it's evil that that Black death is so acceptable. I think it's evil that we have found ways to normalize it and mainstream it and make money off of it. I can't say exactly where the evil comes from, but I completely experience it as evil and want to convince the people that I'm called to serve that addressing any such evils begins with coming back to sort of having the power to name and narrate our story, to say that this is evil, to say that this is unacceptable, to say that this does not reflect a vision or an understanding of community and this kingdom of God that we preach about.
Mm-hmm.
In relationship to our understanding of who God calls us to be, how God calls us to live. That naming and narrating is sort of about speaking truth in the face of the evils that we see. It has to come then to defining a different way of using power. We cannot use the tools of the oppressor to deconstruct the house of the oppressor. And then we got to find some new tools. We have to find some new ways of working with each other in relationships. We have to find some new ways of living together and loving one another that's not based on just the systems that we receive from this world. And that takes time, but it also takes imagination. I mean, and for me, imagination is spiritual energy. We have to pay attention um, to harnessing our spiritual energy through prayer, through meditation, through seeking um, divine energy in a way that it helps us go from naming the ills we face, redefining the sense of power, agency, love that we want to use into a place of sort of imagining a new path forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop there.
No. Look, you had my brain was. I went in all kinds of directions because of what you were saying. No, it's powerful. It's really powerful.
It's big, and it's expansive, and it's hard to preach about it and teach about it when there's so much coming from the alternative consciousness and the alternative consciousness and perspective, the powers of this world, the American empire that we're living in, that frankly I saw a quote yesterday from Reverend Alan Bozak that talked about the American empire in decay. Let me see, because I think this really hits it in a way that I've not heard before. Uh, he said this at I'm guessing commencement at McCormick Seminary. Um, what does it mean to be what does it mean to be the church on the inside of an empire in decay? What does it mean to be a church on the inside of an empire in decay? And part of that decay, I believe, we're seeing people grapple for power at any cost, at the cost of dismissing completely the truths that we know to be, at the cost of dismissing any sense of civility. And so it's almost like we have to make a decision about what we're looking at and how we choose to adapt and respond to it. Because we cannot assume that all things are going to go back to normal and we're going to live in the sense of normal and play by some rules when it seems like, oh, the rules are out the window. And this is a life or death situation. This is not casual. This is consequential.
And intentional, but that's all the thing. Gosh, so there's two things I want to talk about. I want to come back to the thing that you said about the devil, but I really want to continue on with what you just said there. You said you don't necessarily think that this is the devil at work, but this is in people. So help me with that.
Again, I'm confessing I don't have a huge.
No, it's good, but this is great.
For the devil, I mean, I think evil is present in the world.
Even without the devil.
No, I'm saying, I'm telling you, I don't have a working definition. I don't have a complete working understanding. I think that my caution there is that so often the devil is sort of a scapegoat. I think there is, I don't know. Help tease it out some more. Help me out. Come on.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I think it's really interesting that you're saying that because I do think I agree. Like you hear people say, you know, the devil got into somebody or the devil made me do it. So like the devil is constantly a scapegoat. And what I'm hearing you say is, yeah, the devil could be one reason, but then you ain't say it like this. But some of y'all just some damn evil ass people, and ain't nobody making you do nothing. That's what I'm hearing. Some evil ass people. Ain't nobody made you do nothing. You showed up like that.
I think I don't know. I guess I think that because there's also a part of me that sort of believes you also have some power to change that.
I sure.
You know, and so
choice.
yeah, that some of this evil is unaddressed ish, and too often there have been people on the lower rungs of society who've been cast to carry other people's ish. I want you to carry your own ish, if you follow my.
Yes.
What I'm saying, yeah.
So in E5, what we would talk about, and I'm not a scholar, so I wrote one little dissertation and it wasn't even on this part of it. So I'm not a theologian or anything like that. In E5, what we talk about is the Ajogun, so the enemies of human beings: loss, sickness, death, paralysis, negative legal interactions, and things like that. And so these things happen and people have these interactions, but the thing that determines whether one is able to overcome the situation or is completely consumed by the situation is Iwapuele, good character. So if you have Iwa Baruku, bad character, you know, it could be a situation where normally you should be able to jump over them hurdles. But if your character is off, then that situation is going to be difficult for you to overcome. So it's never this kind of idea like blaming an outside entity. It's no, that lands squarely on you. So these outside things may come that you don't, it's not your fault that these outside things come, but whether or not you embrace it, overcome it, learn the lesson from it, that is all up to you and your choice and how you want to show up with your character. Ooh, that's the ancestor stuff.
That's good. That's good. I think the Christian church might express that similar sentiment in, you know, in how we work out there's a scripture that talks about working out your faith and your salvation in fear and trembling, but with a sense of reverence for the character, the commandments that we've been called to follow in such a way that it helps to produce the kind of community and kingdom that leads to that place where wholeness, health, well-being is experienced by all. And so in the absence of working out that practice, we have the opposite of that, which are some of the manifestations of evil that we talked about earlier.
Got it. So what are the lessons that we can learn from the life of Jesus in order to be able to overcome what it is that we're experiencing right now? And I'm talking specifically for people we're going to talk about it in a specific way. You do work with couples. That's your focus. Is it, tell me the name of your counseling? Is it Live Well Counseling? Love Well.
The Love Well Collective Counseling Consulting practice. And our hope is to help you learn how to listen, laugh, and love well as a couple in marriage.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's talk about that in terms of specifically families and facing trauma. Tell me, how do Black families use Jesus, his life, his work as an example to be able to love well as a couple?
Good question. By and large, we use Jesus for everything, for all the troubles that we face. Jesus in the morning, Jesus at noon, Jesus in the evening time. Jesus, call on Jesus. Now, I think that's part of the Black Christian families sort of colloquial understanding. Jesus as being a friend and a helper. But in terms of talking about what it looks like to consider for relationships, I think we can take away from Jesus's witness sort of an intentionality of first meeting people where they are. I think Jesus did a wonderful job of meeting people where they are and not seeing them as the system sees them. Jesus had a way of encountering a woman who's supposedly caught in adultery. And he does a powerful job of even addressing that political system that put her in point of peril and had no point of peril or reckoning for the act part of the equation. We see Jesus meet people at point of need in terms of Mark's gospel. There's a brother who's possessed by demons, and there's a recognition of who he is, and Jesus ultimately provides healing for the brother. But then there's an interesting encounter where he says, "Jesus, let me go with you," and Jesus says, "No, go back and tell the people, what's been done for you." So I think when you ask how does it affect families, I think we have to consider the way that Jesus meets people where they are, how Jesus helps to see their need and provide some sense of healing or awareness. Sometimes he heals people, but sometimes he says, go wash or go do this or go do that. And so there's direction that helps to that invites you to participate in your own healing, I would say. And then ultimately there's the I guess I would say it in a way that there's the belief that what you're looking at right now is not all that's available to you. And so I want to think about there's a passage in, I believe it's John 5, where Jesus asks a man who's been laying around a healing pool for 38 years, do you want to be healed? And the man is like, yeah, I want to be healed. But this system, this healthcare system, where the angel comes and stirs the water once a year, like I ain't found a way to access that. And Jesus invites him to realize that his healing is not completely dependent upon that system. And is present in such a way that invites him to pick up his mat and walk. Now, there's a lot to theologically unpack in that story.
Wow.
But for me, what comes to the fore is, in what ways have we convinced ourselves that healing only looks like one thing? And by doing that, we've forsaken everything else. And part of what Jesus does is widens the playing field, widens our perspective, helps us to see resources that we have otherwise been blind to, doors that can be opened that we have not seen. And so that's also the text that I have traditionally used to offer to my white sisters and brothers in terms of dealing with racist and racism behavior in America. You want to be healed. Or are you relying that this system that you live in is the only system? Because if you want to be healed, then you have to decide your relationship to this system.
Yeah.
And so for all of us, that means something different, picking up your mat and walking. That's as concrete as I can get for you right now.
No, that's beautiful. You said something earlier that I was just thinking about. You called, you said something about Jesus and his Africanity. So you were labeling him as a person of African descent.
Yeah, I see Jesus as a young adult North African community organizer who's grown up in a situation where he's looking at the condition of his people and has through his human. So Jesus, we see Jesus as both being human and divine. That's a Christological articulation of Jesus. That we're always sort of working out his divinity and his humanity. When I think about Jesus' humanity, I see him as a young adult North African community organizer. who's unlike not unlike Moses, right? Moses, someone who grew up in the Pharaoh's house, but had the experience of looking at the condition of his people and decided something's got to be done here. You know, that Jesus in that same way is looking at the condition of his people, is discerning his connection with the divine, and feels a sense of agency and responsibility, a sense of duty to not just fly under the radar in this system. But at the same time, he also has a way of rejecting the system. He also has a way of rejecting people's interpretation of him because they wanted him to be a king, like the kings they had come to know. And he was saying to them that his time had not yet come, but B, that's not the kind of power he's solely committed to operate in.
So does that mean that people who are operating from that space are problematic automatically?
No, I don't think it means that it's problematic, but I think we always have to be conscious of the way we are connected to a system that when we're talking about the American system, that A has been created only for the success and survival of one people, and that people not being us. So we have to be clear about the way we submit and connect with systems that were meant for our demise, or at least our second classness. But then when we talk about just sort of in a broader spectrum, I think the powers of this world can be useful, but we have to be clear if this is the only thing we believe in or count on or rely on to be a source of sustenance and survival for us. Because if it is, then there's always a price that can make you, there's always a price that can be given, which makes you expendable. If it's just about gaining success, fame, wealth in this world. But if you're clear that no, what I need for my soul's salvation, what I need for the furtherance of my family and my people is bigger than what this world has to offer, then there's not a magic number that buys my silence. There's not a perfect job or situation or circumstance that relinquishes my commitment to helping us find the healing that we need internally, find the agency that we need to address some of the systemic challenges that have been thrust upon us, and ultimately provides, and lastly, the sense of imagination that we need to build a better sense of community, family, connection with one another.
Look, our time, we're right at our time. I don't know how the time always like goes really fast. Like when we're having these kind of conversations, they're always like so intriguing to me. And the time, I look up and the time is gone. Okay, I gotta get you to answer one more question. Love. How do you define love for Black people?
For Black people, I think love is one of the most powerful manifestations of God's presence in this world that has been given and sort of gifted to us, and it is a resource and an agency to help us know, to know that we have a divine deposit within, like that God, that we are made of the stuff that God is made of in some form of capacity, and that we have the ability, as I would say, as we have the ability in being co-creators with God, to speak love, to create love, to manifest new ways of loving one another in the same way that we've seen people manifest new ways of hating and harming us. And so if we are to take that power seriously, then I love the expression creating new ways of loving one another. Like being convinced that I have not even tapped the resource of love, that I often speak in metaphors, that love is like a bud that's waiting to bloom and blossom in me. but I gotta nurture it, even as I nurture myself. I gotta speak life and love internally, and then be able to share that in some relationship with somebody outside of myself, because I need them to also reflect that back to me. It may not be in the family system that I was given. It may not be in the person that I choose, but I cannot live in this world without love. And I have it to give, and I also deserve to have it reflected and given back to me.
Reverend Brady, how do people get in touch with you if Black couples want to, figure out how to love well?
Well, if you're interested in learning how to live, laugh, and love well, you can reach me at brady@lovewellatl.com. You can find me on social media at Brother Brady and at lovewellatl. And then you can call me at 678-977-9694. Again, that number is 678-977-9694. At lovewellatl, at Brother Brady. And email address is brady@lovewellatl.com.
Perfect. Reverend Brady, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure and a delight. And I'm encouraged by what you're doing, sister.
Oh, thank you. Now I told you I'm trying to be like you when I grow up. You like
please.
Every time I see you,
sitting at your feet. I'm sitting at your feet. I'm learning from you. I want to be where you are.
We're learning from each other. That's what we're doing, lifting up each other in our different skill sets. So everyone, please. Oh, one more thing. Do you have a website? Is it the lovewellatl.com?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So let me put that in there. I want to make sure people have that. I'm typing that in so it'll be there for everyone. Boom. Got that. So everyone, we have just been talking with Reverend Brady Radford this week, and I hope that you are here. We're hanging out every Friday, having conversations about healing Black people in the community and our psychological well-being. Take care.